Thank you very much. Welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Shall I continue?
Yes, sister.
Thank you. So this slide simply shows what is seen in culture, what is visible, and what is not visible, what informs what we do. Okay, next slide, sister. Okay. So there's a bit of background interference. I'm not so sure.
Maybe we could ask people to switch off their mic, to mute.
Okay. Can you mute them all, please? Can you all mute your mics, please?
Thank you very much. So in perceiving culture, how do we perceive the world? That is informed by our filters, the filters that we use. For example, in monocultural living or monocultural environment, people are more homogeneous, meaning they want to be, it's a natural thing to be with their own, like the Jews to be on their own, or the according to race or according to religion, that people naturally are drawn to be on their own. And ethnocentrism is regarded as a natural tendency, just that we are naturally drawn to our own. But using one's own culture in the broad sense, it's also used as a normative lens for seeing and interpreting and judging others. That's the weakness. Then when people are brought up in a monocultural environment, we tend to other people. And the goal in monocultural living is to avoid contact with others. It's threatening to be with a different people of different culture. Next slide, please. And in our minds, we do have perceptional filters, and these are also informed by memories, experiences, stories that are told around the myths, or collective myths, or individual cultural myths and assumptions. So these inform our perceptional filters, and then we tend to judge other people from influenced by these. Race, values, education, ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, and so on. Next slide, please. So these inform these are just to show how our perceptional filters are influenced and what influences them. Next slide, please, sister. So from monocultural living, let us look at international or multicultural living. Now, we may be international when we live together, but we are not necessarily living interculturally. Here, so what is the difference? International and multicultural living, mere presence of different nations. And somebody used an example of an airport. That's a place for international, intercultural living. People deal with difference. They try to eliminate difference or tolerate difference. But in religious life, we cannot just remain at tolerating differences. We are called to go beyond tolerance to something else, to intercultural living, intentional engaging with a person who is different. So here at Intersectional Living, it's about managing difference, and the goal is eliminating or tolerating or managing difference. But as I have already said, we are called and challenged to go beyond that. Let us look at then at cross-cultural living. Cross-cultural living, most of us who are missionaries, in fact, all of us who are missionaries, experience this. We cross culture from our own culture, we cross into a different culture. So here, it's a commitment to live outside one's own culture, actively learning from another culture. Now, this requires adaptation and possibly acculturation and identification with and an acceptance by another culture, but always as an outsider. So no matter how much we live in a particular culture that we have moved in, either through our missionary work, we will always remain, we usually remain as an outsider because there are certain intricacies that we would have difficulties understanding. And so the goal here is assimilation or accommodation, and it is one directional. Remember, one is moving from one's own to another, so it's one directional. So it is common to missionaries and religious. So the focus is one direction. Now we move on to intercultural living, which is what this workshop is leading us to and also encouraging us. So intercultural living, what is it? It is intentional engagement with differences for the sake of understanding and enrichment. As I don't want to downplay challenge, it is a challenge. As Sister Winnie was talking about, the potential conflict between a person coming from an individual-centric and socio-centric. How do we understand, how do we come to a common understanding who is operating from who? It comes through intentional engagement, intentional dialogue with an openness. So ambiguity is tolerated here in intercultural living. And there's a commitment to mutual dialogue. And really, we cannot underline enough mutual, because it has to be both sides, listening and contributing. There's an openness to change and the challenge and to challenge. The aim is at creating a balanced relationships, acknowledging our prejudices, the stereotypes, and we all have them. It is human nature, but it is also grace to recognize this and then to engage with the other person. So the goal of interculturality here is the reign of God, seeing another person from God's spectacles, as different from monocultural, where I try to judge another person, my own culture. But here, it's the challenge is to wear God's spectacles and see another person as God sees that other person, and sees their values as God sees those values. Next one, please. So interculturality as a religious value, the meaning of interculturality goes beyond mere coexistence or tolerance. It is grace. The emphasis is on mutuality of the process of cultural interaction on both the personal and the social levels for the sake of God's mission. Meaning within religious life ad intra and in ministry ad extra. And it is interesting that business is also speaking about interculturality. Why? For profit making. But we have been called to do this for God's reign, to build God's kingdom. So this is a grace but it's a challenge as well. So next one, intercultural living and mission. Yes, so intercultural living is radically different from living in an international community. We can exist like at a boarding school, in an international community. We can just be together and communicate minimally. Be there. We are not fighting, we're just there. But interculturality stretches us beyond just mere coexistence. It describes specifically the way we live out our faith and discipleship. It is about quality of relationships. Are we connected in our relationships? We might want to ask ourselves, and as we evaluate the communities where we are, to what extent are we connected in the relationships in the community? That's the challenge of intercultural living. So intercultural living is not a problem, but a challenge. It's an opportunity, not theirs, but ours. So it's also an attitude which informs our language. It is impossible in an us and them world. In fact, it is opposed to an us and them world. It is a we world. It is intercultural living. It's a we world. So, and God is calling us to live in a we world. So intercultural living is not natural, but it is possible. Perhaps it is really supernatural, because it needs grace for us to go beyond the pain and the challenges. So it is unequivocally faith-based living, not just acquiring new techniques. Of course, we do need techniques for communication, for dialogue, and so on, but it is not just that. So it is not easy, but it is desirable. God desires it. It is God who desires this, and it is urgently needed. If one culture is not to dominate, then everyone is called to conversion. Convert from what? Convert from our prejudices and stereotypes, and this is ongoing. It needs full commitment and hard work. Goodwill is not enough. Historically, religious goodwill alone has sometimes perpetrated injustice. I'm sure we all know this in our different contexts. It requires, intercultural living requires compromise, real dialogue, and clear common vision, and the commitment to stay in the dialogue. Sometimes it might be too painful. We want to run away, we want to back out, but it's a commitment to stay in the dialogue. It's also about engaging our diversity through interculturality. Now, Tony Gitting said something that was very something to think about. He says, unless international communities become intercultural, sorry, it's not on this slide. Unless international communities become intercultural, they will not survive. So it's something to think about. Unless international communities become intercultural, they will not survive as part of God's reign. So interculturality, it's an interaction. We can look at it also as an interaction between icebergs, bumping into each other. So to be aware of the underlying values below the surface is the trick. So we can refer also to what Sister Winnie presented, social-centric versus individuals, and what are the underlying values that are in conflict, especially when conflict arises. So we don't have to agree on anything, to be kind to one another. Love goes beyond our differences. So what, next slide, please, sister. So Roger Schroeder speaks about an attitude of entering when we enter into dialogue. He uses an image of entering someone else's garden. I found that very beautiful, a beautiful image. When we enter into somebody else's garden, we don't start pulling out the weeds and so on, because we might end up pulling what we think are weeds, might be a crop, might be a herb for the owner of the garden. So what attitude do we take when I enter into someone else's garden? Next slide. Calls for cultural sensitivity when entering into someone else's garden. There are theological issues connected to this image. Jesus had also made reference to agricultural images through some of his parables, like the parable of the sower and the seed, the darnel sown by the enemy, which are values contrary to God's reign, and the good seed growing on its own while the farmer sleeps. That refers to the power of the word of God, which is at work in us. So how to begin to enter someone else's garden? We take off our shoes. The taking off one's shoes, both in community life and in ministry. Sensitivity, treading carefully. It's holy grounds. I also need to understand my own garden, because I can't go into with what I understand as weed and crop, and then impose those values in another person's garden. So in understanding my own garden, I need to understand my own social location. And this is very, very important at initial formation. That initial formation ought to help us to understand and to discover, where do I come from? Social location in which I grew up, my gender, economics, class, generation, nationality, all those I need to understand. Ethnicity, race, social change, particularly in individual communal circumstances. So what are the seeds there? What are the weeds in my own garden? And then God's life in those growing plants while the farmer sleeps. It's also at work. Can I discover all that comes through my understanding of my own garden? Next slide, please. So the way we see and interpret what we see in our world is conditioned by our socialization. We know this. It is just another way of putting it. Next slide, please. We are nearly done. So why enter into someone else's garden anyhow? So when ministry is seen as dialogical, it means that ministers become persons immersed in the world of others, like Jesus was in our world. It is with people, therefore, that the minister begins to ask questions. It is with people that basic human values are endorsed and challenged. And it is this context that shapes the way of announcing the good news or the good seed, and of denouncing sinful structures or the weeds. So we take off our shoes when entering someone else's garden. I don't bring in the dirt from outside. In some households, they leave shoes outside at the threshold. I don't bring in the dirt from outside into somebody else's household, or we don't come into somebody else's house and start rearranging the pictures and say, no, put it this way and this way. It's sensitivity and respect. So how does a safe space look like? These are the values that help us to create this safe, sensitive space where dialogue can honestly take place. Openness, respect, suspend judgment, self-esteem, trust, honesty, acceptance, commitment, confidentiality, and welcoming. And a circle facilitates that kind of atmosphere where every person can be seen and heard. So being a stranger, if a newcomer honestly presents herself or himself as a stranger, thus showing respect for the host and allowing them to take certain necessary initiatives. This facilitates interaction, even though the price may be some uncertainty and powerlessness on the part of the stranger. So a stranger here would be like a missionary, or as we enter into dialogue. Once we give up control, we are better able to be open to hear what the other person is saying and trying to express. So, but only by doing this will missionaries or ministers be able to indicate their openness, integrity, and willingness to engage in relationships. So we put ourselves in a position of not controlling the dialogue, but be open, and then we can learn. That also refers to childlike learning, like a child, becoming a child in the garden of the other. There's also the importance of mentors who have walked this way, who can help us how to integrate and be open. Also to allow ourselves to make mistakes. We will make mistakes, we have made mistakes, and to allow that reality, and then identifying our own prejudices, and then theological perspectives of both seeds and weeds, my own seeds and weeds, and also the obvious weeds, and like violence. I mean, violence, even if we don't want to judge anyone, violence is not a gospel value. So what do we do in someone else's garden? What is my attitude? My basic attitude of dialogue is dialogue, distinguishing one's own garden from that of the other. Sometimes to take a prophetic stance. Now that can be quite scary, but we need to wait to understand what is going on in the context before we can make judgments. So intercultural and intergenerational relationships, dialogue is part of this. Then the good seed or weeds, how do we know? Like the care for the weak and the elderly, we can distinguish, would it be good seed? Is it the weed? Sorcery, violence against the innocent, women and children, domestic violence, abuse. These are some of the obvious weeds that are permeating our societies. So what happens to your own garden in all this? What happens to my own garden? We're nearly there. Just a few more slides. Next one, sister. So what happens to my own garden, to your own garden? It's challenged, it's enriched. It's mission in reverse. It's like when we also look at the experiences of our own nephews and nieces or other generations or young sisters, we really see that it's we can be challenged, we can also be enriched in our own garden. Sharing and enriching, it does and it enriches our charism and community life of our religious congregations. So in conclusion, 3 stages in the interaction between people of different cultures or generations. There can be fascination with difference, can be tension due to difference, real mutual interaction and dialogue, we are challenged, we are stretched beyond tolerance to mutual intercultural living and mission. Or all of them can be going on at the same time and changing depending on the context or the where we are in the dialogue. So finally, embrace your own garden. I think that's what I can say. Embrace them. Thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry I've taken so long. There are 2 questions following this slide, which you might wish to think about. And then, of course, there's the bibliography. The questions are, what are the challenges that hinder me from entering into intercultural living? What are the challenges that hinder me from entering into intercultural living? And then practically, what is possible when people of different cultures live and interact together? Thank you very much.
So, thank you so much, sisters. We thought we would play you a music after our presentation, but then we're looking at the time. Maybe we would like to hear from you. Any comment, if there's anything that maybe you would like to say. And thank you so much, Sister Monica, for the nice presentation. Well prepared. Thank you very much, Sister. Thank you. Yes, Sister Nana, would you like to ask anything, something?
Sorry, it's not Sister Nana, it's Father Nana.
Oh, so
It's okay, no problem. It's okay, no problem. I would like to thank the group. Really, it is a nice presentation. Thank you very much. And especially on the presentation of Sister Monica on intercultural, living interculturality. And something that she emphasizes, and it was not even on the slides, unless international communities become intercultural, they will not survive. And this is a reality nowadays. And I would like even to add, unless even national communities, because sometimes we can be from the same country, but even though we have a different cultural background. So this is to say that we can be even from the same family, from the same country, but we have many cultures. Because someone will do maybe the novitiate in Zambia, and after that we'll go to Cameroon, even if come back to South Africa. She has so many culture behind herself. So we have to take it as an alarm for our communities. Unless our communities become real intercultural communities, they will not survive. And thank you very much for the presentation. This was just my comment.
Thank you, brother. I see there are a few sisters with comments on the other side. Thank you very much. Other sisters were just okay, complimenting the good presentation. Thank you so much, sisters. Thank you very much. And I don't know if there's anyone who would like to say something, or maybe shall we call it a night?
Sister
The
Prudence.
questions are there. Sister Prudence?
Thank you. Just
Yeah.
something that in Sister Monica's presentation, which struck me very forcibly, was she mentioned initial formation. And I thought that's a place to begin with this intercultural education and awareness, let's put it in broad terms. But it's something that has to be intentionally done. It's not going to just happen by osmosis. It's going to be something that we have to work at, and we have to have programs of information and sharing and exchange between cultures within our communities. So community meetings could be enriched by this kind of discussion, and using just the slides that you have presented tonight could be a very valuable springboard for valuable exchange of values and ideas and challenges. But it's not going to happen unless we actually get down to it and do something. We've got to be intentional. It's got to be a program that's ongoing. Otherwise, it isn't going to just do itself. But I really found the presentation very enlightening again this week. I found it so helpful to read all those headings and to hear you. And I feel this is a really big and powerful presentation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Sister Prudence. Yeah, formation is where everything has to start. But we also have an ongoing formation. We also must give an example to the young ones. Thank you very much, Sister Prudence. Is there anyone who still needs to say something?
Yes.
I see sisters. Is it
Sister
okay?
Winnie.
FMN sisters.
Yes, Sister Immaculate here. Sister, the questions
Yeah, I
that
see.
Sister Monica
Yeah,
has given us, they seem to be the same as what we had last week.
Is it?
Yes.
But I think
and-
also in the middle of the presentation, there were another 2 questions, I think, about the conflicts. You can also answer those 2 questions as well.
Right, thank you, Sister.
It's all included in community living.
Okay, thanks so much, Sister Tao.
Okay, thank you, Sister Tao. Okay, I see we've got just 1 minute to go. In the absence of any comment, I would like to thank you for listening to us, and I wish you a blessed evening. Thank you very much. Good night.
Just one announcement.
Okay, next
because
week
of
then.
the changing of the Zoom setting. So next week we will have a different Zoom link. So I will try to send it out as early as possible. So just look out for the new link, because this link is not working, only give us 40 minutes, so which is very, very disrupting. So yes, I will try to send to the conference, but I received a few requests from different sisters or different groups. So I will send to also individual email addresses. Yes. Thank you. I'm not. Stephanie?
And
Yes,
we will share all the slides.
Yes, I will share all the slides as well. Yes.
Stephanie?
Somebody wanted, at least one of you said, to play out. Maybe you could play out with the music and go as far as, we've only got your, what, 1 minute or 4 minutes. We've got 4 minutes. So we might play out.
Sorry, Winnie, can you play it on your computer, because I'm recording, so I can't go to YouTube at the moment.
Oh, I don't think I will be able to share the screen, because this is we can't share. But anyway, you will get the link, sisters. You will receive the link, the
Oh, it's going on.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
It was beautiful.
Yes, and thanks for joining us. And we saw a few brothers and priests this week, so really we are grateful to have your present with us. Thank you.
God bless. Bye.
Thank you, and have a good night and peaceful sleep and sweet dreams.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
Night night.
Thank you. The same to you, sister.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good presentation. Very grateful.
Thank you.